Good evening to all the participants. Before we start the meeting, I would like to wish all of you a very happy Independence Day. Uh, Today, we have our very own Raghavan sir, who will be taking this talk on condition of a contract versus consideration for contract under GST. We are looking forward for this webinar because I am sure that it's going to be pretty useful and very informative. So once Raghavan sir finishes his presentation, we will have the question answer round also, and it will go as how it usually goes. So you can raise your hands in the app and you can put in your queries in the chat box. So thank you once again all for joining us. We will hear now from Raghavan sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Prithvi. Thank you, all my seniors and friends. Thank you for again giving me this opportunity to talk on a topic. This trigger for today's session is, I should say, why suddenly this topic is because of a recent larger bench decision of the CESTAT in the case of Repco Home Finance. So that is the trigger for today's topic. I'll directly go to my slides without wasting much time on the introduction. Hope my screen is visible as a presentation, right?
Yes, sir.
First of all, a very happy Independence Day to all of us. On this day, we should remember the sacrifices made by all our leaders who enable us enjoy this freedom. And also very relevant to this topic, to this day, is the quote by our father of the nation, where he says, freedom is not worth having if it does not include the freedom to make mistakes. So on this day of independence, please also give me the freedom to make my own mistakes. Please correct me, but allow me to make my mistakes. So the agenda for today's session is going to go like this. First is, what is a condition for a contract? And what is a consideration for the contract? What is the difference between these two? Is there a difference between a consideration for the contract and condition of contract? Then briefly we will discuss about the decision of the Honorable Larger Bench in the case of Repco Home Finance. That Repco Home Finance decision is not under the GST regime. It was not even under the what we call as the negative list regime of service tax. That judgment was a period much before that. So therefore, we are going to see the relevance of that decision for the subsequent periods and also test the present day relevance of it. And we will also deal with certain specific issues which I have identified. Yes, of course, it goes without saying that we can multiply on that. We can understand from all of you, like you can give the more situations or you can also give suggestions on that. Consideration for a contract versus conditions of a contract. Why are we seeing this? What is the requirement for seeing this? And can't these be one and the same? So what is the difference? Honorable Supreme Court, in the case of Chhatrapati Chital, which is an election matter, held that when a contract consists of a number of terms and conditions, each condition does not form a separate contract, but is an item in the one contract of which it is a part. This is a very, very prophetic statement by the Honorable Supreme Court, extremely important. Every word is important. This will give answer to many of the doubts which we have while dealing with our cases. It says, a contract may consist of several terms and conditions. Each condition has to be performed. There is no doubt. It's a condition of the contract, so therefore one has to fulfill the condition. But just because you are performing each and every condition does not make it a separate contract. You can't say each and every condition is an independent contract in itself. These conditions put together form a single contract. So it is only part of the larger contract. The contract is performed only when all the conditions are performed. Performance of each and every condition is not performance of a distinct contract. This is what the Honorable Supreme Court says. The court further goes on to say that the consideration for each condition in a case like this is the consideration for the contract taken as a whole. Sometimes what can happen is, for these each and every condition, the contract might have stipulated some consideration. I mean, might have considerated some, might have given some amount towards it. They would say that if you perform this condition, I'll pay you so much consideration. So the consideration for each and every condition might have been identified. But each one of that is not a consideration for that condition alone. All put together, the summation of all those considerations is the consideration for the whole contract. It is not split up into several considerations apportioned between each condition or each term separately. So it is not as if, even if there is a separate condition, even if some consideration is identified for that condition will not become a distinct contract, number one. And that consideration will not be treated as consideration only for that condition. No, even if it is distinctly identified, you sum up all those considerations and the sum total will become the consideration for the whole contract. I am giving this prologue because this is going to become relevant in future. But what we definitely understand from this is there is a difference between a condition of the contract and consideration for the contract. In the case of Bayana Builders, again, this was a large bench decision of the Honorable Sestat, and subsequently it was affirmed by the Honorable Supreme Court also. The issue here was the taxability of free issue items under the service tax regime. That is, there is a service provider, he will be providing service to a service receiver. But the contract stipulates that the service receiver should make available, I'm using the phrase make available, should make available certain items or certain services to enable the service provider perform the service. The question is, when the service receiver pays an identified monetary consideration and over and above that he makes available certain items to enable the service provider perform the contract, is this item which is made available by the service receiver become an additional consideration or not? What we usually call as free supply items, FOC items. That is, the service recipient supplies some items to service provider to enable the service provider provide the service. Whether these FOC items will become or will form part of non-monetary consideration or additional consideration, should the value of these items also be included while being taxed on the service or not? When this was put forth before the Honorable Larger Bench, the Honorable Larger Bench was requested to give a ruling on this. Honorable Larger Bench relied on an Australian GST ruling, namely 2001/6. This ruling was read upon, and that ruling said the recipient of a supply may provide or make a thing available for the supplier to use in making the supply. So the recipient makes available. However, the thing does not necessarily form consideration. They are rather conditions of the contract that define the supply made and are used in provision of the supply rather than being a consideration in return for the supply. They do not provide economic value in return for the supply. So here it was said that you can see that it is not a consideration, it is a condition. So it's a stipulation put forth on the recipient for him to perform. The recipient has to perform these things. Only after he performs this, the service provider can perform his part of the job. So therefore, it is a condition which is put on the service recipient, and you cannot monetize it and say that this is the consideration which is payable by the service recipient to the service provider. This was what was held. And after noting this ruling, the larger bench of the Sestat held mere enlargement of the contours of gross amount charge. Why we are talking about enlargement of contours of gross amount charges? Gross amount charge is couched in a very, very wide definition. It's an inclusive definition. So mere enlargement of the gross amount charge in a condition incorporated in an exemption notification would not amount to bringing to tax net a value which is not taxable under 67. What it all means is, under 67, what is liable to tax is consideration only. If certain thing is not forming part of consideration, then by whichever means you cannot tax it. Even the wide definition of gross amount charge will only levy a tax on consideration. Therefore, the first question to be put forth is whether something is a consideration or not. We need not say, if something is not a consideration, by no means it can become part of gross amount charge. So this is what the Honorable Sestat has held in the case of Bayana Builders. While saying this, I also felt it's extremely important to discuss this judgment of N.M. Goyal, which arose in the sales tax context, but still very, very relevant. It's an old judgment, but in the sales tax context, it's a very important judgment. Take a case where, let us say, for an example, I'm taking names. So if I am Steel Authority of India, let us say I'm Steel Authority of India. I want to construct an additional facility near my factory, so another construction has to take place. I engage a contractor, a builder. Let us say I give the contract to L&T. L&T comes and constructs. The contract is for, let us say, 50 crores. Steel Authority of India gives the entire contract, that is both goods, services, everything has to be done by L&T only. So the total contract value is 50 crores. Now L&T starts performing. In the course of performance, then Steel Authority says, see, in any case you have to construct, you have to buy steel from someone. If you buy from outside, etc., it will be more cost, etc., and I don't know what will be the quality of the steel which you will be procuring. So don't buy steel from outside, I will give you steel. So L&T says, SAIL says, don't buy steel from outside, I will give steel to be used for this construction, and SAIL gives the steel. Let us say steel value is 10 crore rupees. Then L&T, what it does is, clearly it raises an invoice for 50 crores, less value of steel provided by Steel Authority of India, 10 crores, balance 40 crores. There are two questions here. Number one, is L&T liable to tax on this 50 crores, or is it liable to tax on 40 crores? This is one question. Other question is, on the 10 crore worth of steel which SAIL has provided to L&T, is SAIL liable to sales tax as sale of goods on this 10 crores? This is another question. Now, we have to see the contract, then only we can give an answer to it. What is the contract for? Contract is for construction of a factory. The contract does not say anything else. Contract does not impose a condition on Steel Authority to give steel, etc. Contract says only this much, 50 crore contract, everything is the responsibility of L&T. But after that, Steel Authority of India gives steel. That is like L&T could have procured from any third party. Instead of buying from third party, they procured from the buyer itself. So there is a procurement. So the court held SAIL has sold steel to L&T, and L&T in turn has made it a forming part of works contract and sold it back to SAIL. This is what the court held. Assessee argued saying that, see, I have to pay them only 40 crores, not 50 crores. Court said, see, the contract is for 50 crores. For that, you paid by material 10 crores. It is like that. And balance 40 crore, you have to pay in cash. This is only an adjustment on the invoice. It is as if L&T paid you 10 crores and you paid 10 crores back to L&T. It is as good as that. Therefore, taxable value is 50 crores and not 40 crores. Had this contract been slightly differently worded, we would not have got this ruling. That is, suppose if L&T's contract says that L&T will do the construction, but SAIL has to provide all the steel to be used for construction, and L&T will construct only using the steel which is made available by SAIL. If that is said so, And if the contract itself is entered for 40 crores, then what would have happened is, if someone asks what is the consideration for the contract, it would have been only 40 crores. Because the steel which is supplied is not a separate supply at all. As per the contract, L&T is forced to construct using the steel which is made available by SAIL, and it is obligatory on the part of SAIL to provide the entire steel which is required for the contract. So it is a condition imposed on SAIL to provide, to satisfy all the requirement of steel for the construction project. Only if SAIL makes steel available, L&T should perform the contract. Otherwise, L&T need not. So therefore, initially the contract did not stipulate this steel supply by SAIL as an obligation, as a condition. It was not imposed. Therefore, the entire 50 crores was getting taxed. Had the contract been differently worded to say it is the responsibility of SAIL to make available the steel for which is used for performing the contract, then this steel portion would have been treated only as a condition imposed on SAIL, and it will not be treated as consideration which is paid by SAIL to L&T. So therefore, we have a learning from this judgment. This judgment is important because it tells us how to enter into contracts. Having said this, what is the larger bench about? The larger bench decision in Repco Home Finance, the facts that was involved was, we all know that Repco Home Finance is a finance company. It's into the business of giving loans to various people, etc. Suppose I have taken a loan from Repco Finance, and let us say the loan is for 20 years, let us say so. And we agree on a certain interest rate. And because we have decided the interest rate, we have decided the period also, we will arrive at a certain EMI. So EMI will include the principal repayment, interest repayment also. There will be some documentation charges, all those charges. We are not talking about that, processing fee, etc. On that, all service tax was paid. There is no dispute about that. The only question is, if as a borrower I take loan from Repco Finance, but though the tenure of the loan was 20 years, I don't want to service it for the entire period. At the end of, let us say, 3 years or 5 years, I come back to Repco and then say, I want to foreclose this loan. I have the money with me. I will pay you back the principal. Relieve me from the contract. I don't want to continue further with the contract. I will pay you whatever you say. Then Repco, what it does is, okay, fine. The total principal outstanding is so much. You have to pay me this much. Over and above that, you have to pay me something called foreclosure charges. And how is this foreclosure charges calculated? Mostly it can vary with banks, but mostly it is calculated as the present value of all the future interest payments. That is, for the interest which is unpaid for the subsequent year for the entire tenure of the loan, that is 20 years, how much is the interest payable? If you discount it to the present day value, arrive at the present value of the future outflows, future inflows, whatever is the amount that comes to, the bank would levy that as foreclosure charges on the borrower. You have to pay me this foreclosure charges. Some banks call it prepayment charges, whatever. That's only nomenclature. This, the service tax department felt that principal repayment, yes, we won't tax you. But this foreclosure charges should be liable to service tax, pay service tax on that. Remember, our period is pre-2012. Pre-2012, as I said, this will not fall under any particular category of service, etc. The service tax department said, why banking and other financial services there? In banking and other financial services, there is a clause which says in services provided in relation to lending. So therefore, this is in relation to lending. Therefore, this is liable to service tax. This is the case of the department. This is the main case of the department, that the foreclosure charges that are recovered is also forming part of the lending contract only, and therefore it is in relation to lending. Therefore, it should be liable to service tax. Why this came to larger bench is because there are a few judgments of the division bench of the tribunal which held that this cannot be subjected to service tax, this is not liable to service tax, while there is another judgment which said this is liable to service tax. Clearly there is a conflict, and therefore the matter was referred to the larger bench. The larger bench held in favor of the assessee, holding that the foreclosure charges are not liable to service tax. How the court held so? How did the court arrive at this conclusion? It is like this. Court said, before we see whether it is in relation to lending or not, first we should see whether it is a consideration for service or not. So the court held what can be subject to tax is only consideration. Consideration can be monetary, consideration can be non-monetary, but whatever form it takes before that, it has to first satisfy the requirement of it being treated as a consideration. Any and every amount we received is not consideration. Many amounts will be received. All will not satisfy the character of being treated as a consideration. So first we have to see whether this money which is received in the name of foreclosure charges, whether it is a condition, whether it is a consideration or not. And there is also a difference between condition to a contract and consideration for the contract. Some conditions assigned a monetary value that will not become consideration. Then how to decide whether it is consideration or not? Court held unilateral act of one party coupled with payment. Can it be treated as consideration? Consideration means it is something in return. It's a quid pro quo. If one party to the contract unilaterally does something which frustrates the contract and which triggers a payment event, can that be called as consideration? Then the court also, these are all the questions which the court has initially framed. I will deal with each one of these separately. Then the court says, just because some amount is mentioned in the contract as liquidated damages, will it amount to a consideration for supply? So the court dealt with all these cases. And what is liquidated damages? What is alternate mode of performance? So having identified all these questions, the court proceeded like this. First and foremost, what is consideration for the contract? Consideration for the contract is an amount which is payable by under the contract towards performance of the contract. If A enters into a contract with B, A performs something, B also fulfills his promise, then whatever money is paid by B to A is consideration, because it is towards performance. And what is also important is the consideration as such is not defined under the service tax ever. You always see consideration as an inclusive definition, which expands the consideration to include any amount paid not in money, or consideration paid by way of check, demand draft, etc. But consideration as such, the natural meaning remains. In fact, the education guide under the 2012 regime, when it was issued, they said the consideration should be understood in the light of the definition of consideration under the Contract Act. If you go by the Contract Act, the definition of consideration, which is under section 2 clause D, starts with where? At the desire of the promisor. That's how the definition will start. So this expression, desire of the promisor, is very, very crucial. That means consideration is a consensual payment. That is, the service provider wants it, service receiver also wants to pay it, service provider receives. The service provider it is at his desire that this is paid. That is, he treats this as fulfillment of promise. Then only it is paid. So it is at the desire of the promisor what the amount which is paid is treated as consideration. In this case, where the agreement has been entered for a loan for a tenure of, let us say, 20 years. But the service recipient does not service the loan for the agreed tenure. The agreement does not give him any options of not performing, etc. 20 years is the agreement. 20 years you have to perform, you have to service the loan. Suddenly you come and say, I don't want to service this loan. That is not in my interest. I don't intend, I am not happy if he wriggles out of my contract. So he is basically frustrating the contract. He wants to repudiate the contract. He wants to cancel the contract. He wants to not perform. I want him to perform. He doesn't want to perform. So it's an unilateral act. And that party says, I want to get out of the contract. I agreed for 20 years, but I don't want to fulfill my promise. I want to get out. One option for me is, okay, let me incur all the loss. Thank you, bye. That is one thing I can say. Or the other thing is, why should I suffer? I didn't frustrate the contract. I didn't close the contract. It is him who is doing it. And if it is between two people, if one person doesn't perform, I cannot perform unilaterally. So contract has to be fulfilled by both the people. So if he escapes, what is the remedy for me? How will I continue? And I would have incurred a lot of damages. There is also a loss of profits. So many things happen. So what I say, see, now you are frustrating the contract, but I am losing something because of this. So you pay me some amount. I say this. He also agrees. So he pays. Then we are fine. Now, when he makes this payment to me, is it a consideration? To my mind, it is not. Consideration is an amount which is paid towards the performance of a contract. But this guy pays this amount as a consequence of breach of a contract. When he pays this amount as a consequence of breach, he is actually compensating me and he is not remunerating me. He is not paying the consideration for any performance. So he is compensating me for the breach which he is committing. So therefore that compensation cannot take the color of consideration. So put it in a single sentence. Consideration is towards performance of the contract, while compensation is towards breach of a contract, is consequent to breach of a contract. A compensation which is paid consequent to breach of contract can never take the color of consideration. Therefore, this will not become consideration. Therefore, to my mind, it cannot be taxed. Let us take a further situation. So what I said is, after he frustrates the contract, I tell him, pay me some money, he agrees. So after that we agreed. So does it become a separate agreement? The answer is no, it is flowing out of the same contract. To avoid all these things, what I did is, at the time we entered into agreement, there itself I put a clause. If you want to cancel this loan agreement before the tenure is over prematurely, then you should pay me so much. I write this in the contract itself. So does it mean I have agreed to tolerate with him? Is there an agreement there in the damages clause? That is also a question which can come up. Not dealt with in this judgment, but this can come up. The answer to that is, there is a clause relating to performance. And there is a clause which takes care of the eventuality of a breach. That clause there which stipulates that you have to pay me so much amount if you frustrate the contract, if you repudiate the contract, that is providing for an eventuality of a breach. If he performs, he need not pay. If he doesn't perform, he has to pay. So that is providing for an eventuality of breach of a contract that will never partake the character of consideration. In fact, if you see our Contract Act, there is a chapter on consequence of breach. Breach of a contract is there. In that, there is a subtopic on consequence of breach. Section 73 talks about consequence of breach. Section 74 deals with consequence of breach where the damages is named in the contract itself. That is, the contract itself stipulates of how much the damage should be. There is a specific provision under the Indian Contract Act. So that this is not there under the common law countries. It is not there. Only in India it is codified. In UK, etc., this clause was never there. So therefore, India, when it codified, it thought of it and it gave two scenarios providing for consequence of breach. First is where the damage is not named in the contract. Second is where the damages is named in the contract. So even if the damages is named in the contract, it still remains to be damages. It is named in the contract, sir, therefore it will become consideration. No, it doesn't say so. So therefore, to avoid disputes between the parties, parties can enter into consequence of breach and then they can record it in the agreement. Just because they record it doesn't mean there is a parallel performance of that clause and there is a parallel consideration. Here only you have to remember that Chaturbhuj Vital, where it says there can be some clauses in the contract which provides for condition which can also have some amount. Doesn't mean you are performing that clause separately with that consideration. It does not mean that. So therefore, even if the damages is mentioned in the contract, it will not become a consideration. In this case, it was also argued that this lending is one thing, but if he breaches, he has to pay. So breach is an alternate mode of performance. That the court said, how can it be? There is an agreement for lending, that is performance of the contract. If he prematurely closes it, he has to pay some amount. As the department argued, that is an alternate mode of performing the contract. Court said this is not alternate mode of performing. Just apply it to our case. Lending is one performance. What is the alternate mode of performance according to the department? That is closing the contract, terminating the contract. If lending is the contract, alternate mode should also be alternate method of lending. How can lending have an alternative method of performance which is terminating the lending? So the court held lending and termination are antitheses. It cannot be alternate mode. It cannot be in relation to lending. When I enter into a contract to do something, I don't give you an option to terminate it and call it as another way of performing the contract is terminating it. It can never happen. I enter into a contract of marriage and alternate method of being in the relationship is cancelling the marriage. No, it cannot be. These two are antitheses. It can never be. So therefore, court held this is not alternate mode of performance. This is breach of the contract. Therefore, it cannot be taxed. This is a very, very important judgment according to me because it lays down a lot of principles and it also deals with certain authorities on compensation damages. Where it talks about a restitution interest, a reliance interest, etc. But I'm not dealing with those for the simple reason that once we accept that this is damages, then how to determine damages is something. That is, for example, if I engage somebody to construct something in my place, so I give the land, somebody has to come and construct. The contractor breaches the contract. Then he has to put me back to the original position. So this is understandable. He has to put me back to original position. Therefore, that is restitution. But in certain kinds of contracts like banking contracts or the insurance contracts, etc., when we have started performing, if someone moves back, then he should not put me back to the original position, but he should put me back to into a situation where the contract is performed. So there are two ways. One is how to determine damages. Should you put me back to the position when we never entered into contract, or should you put me into a position where the contract is performed? So for each industry, it will be different. For some industries, it is enough if you put me back to the position when contract is not performed. But in some situations where I would have invested based on your promise, you have to put me back to a position where the contract is performed. So this is called reliance interest versus restitution. So therefore, these kind of things were also discussed in the matter, and the court held that there is a difference between these two. But in any case, these are not relevant here because these are all methods on how to calculate the breach. So therefore, reliance or restitution is putting me back to a position where contract is never started. Expectation interest is a situation where you put me to a situation where the contract, assuming it is performed, where will I be? So therefore, there is a difference between restitution versus expectation interest. And the court held that for some categories, expectation interest will apply. But in any case, these two are only methods of quantifying damages. So long as it is damages, we need not see how to quantify it. It can never be forming part of consideration. So this is what the larger bench held. Now, how to apply this judgment in the negative list regime or GST regime? We all know section 66B is the charging section post 2012. 67 was the same, that is the valuation rule, section that always provided for consideration. So consideration is liable to tax. 65B44 service definition will say activity for consideration. And the education grade also says consideration and in contract. So till this stage, there is no difference. That is, tax is on service. The value is the consideration, and consideration is as understood under the Indian Contract Act. So to this extent, it is all the same. Similarly, if you see the GST, charges on supplies, but that should also be supplies made or agreed to be made for consideration. So like service tax is activity for consideration, GST is also supply for consideration. So this for consideration is still there. And the valuation also, section 15(1) also talks about consideration is the one which is liable to tax. So here again, consideration is very, very widely defined. Therefore, the Contract Act definition will still continue to apply. So therefore, I don't see a difference. Yes, there are some differences in the inclusions in the valuation, but ignoring that, other than that, not ignoring that, other than those, there is no difference. That is, whatever was there pre-2012, whatever was there post-2012, whatever is there post-2017, all are tax which is liable to be paid on consideration. There is no significant change in the definition of consideration. And therefore, if some activity was held, if any money paid towards some activity was held as not consideration during any of these regimes, it can never become consideration for a supply even post 2017. So to my mind, post 2017 also, this payment will continue to remain as a damage compensation for breach, and therefore this will never become consideration for a supply. So this is what I was saying. Service tax is activity for consideration. GST is supply made or agreed to be made for consideration. So service tax and GST are both contract-based levies and event-based levies, dependent on contractual understanding between the parties. Therefore, consideration definition is important. It has to be at the desire of the promisor, and it should be towards performance and not towards breach. Some specific issues. The immediate question which people will ask is, pre-2012 is fine, but what will happen post-2012? Because post-2012, there is a declared service. Section 66E, clause E says, an agreement to refrain from an act or tolerate an act, tolerate a situation, etc., that is also treated as service. So here, won't that apply? That is, the REPCO has expected the borrower to perform the contract. Borrower is committing a breach. REPCO is tolerating the breach. Therefore, this consideration which is received is towards tolerating an act. Therefore, it will be service. This is the immediate thing which anybody will come up. It's a good point, but this is how people will come up. The immediate answer to that is, I tolerated a breach doesn't mean I agreed to tolerate a breach. That is, it still remains a breach. It is not performance of the contract. In the same contract where I ask him to perform, in the same contract, I cannot expect him to commit a breach and treat it as a performance. Where will this clause apply? This clause will apply in a situation, take a situation like this. Take a situation like this. I don't know if I gave this example earlier, but I will give again. There is a huge family dispute between two brothers. They are fighting with each other. Maybe it is based on a will or maybe any ancestral property, etc. The brothers are fighting. The matter has reached the Supreme Court. The elder brother engages Mr. A, who is the best senior advocate in town. Like he is very renowned, brilliant in the subject. So he engages Mr. A. But suddenly he gets a doubt, and on his inquiries he finds Mr. B is also equally efficient. He is also very good. Then A cannot engage both, not necessary also. But he is worried, not A, elder brother is worried that his younger brother will engage B. So elder brother has engaged Mr. A, but he is worried that younger brother will engage B, then this will become a big fight. Therefore, what he thinks is, let me go to Mr. B, talk to him, and request him not to appear for his younger brother. So, this guy, elder brother, engages A to argue his matter. And he goes to Mr. B and engages him to refrain from arguing for his younger brother. In the contract with Mr. A has to come and argue. That is his performance. If Mr. A doesn't turn up, that is breach. In the contract with Mr. B, he should not turn up. That is performance. If he comes and argues, it is a breach of the contract. So contract with Mr. A is to perform, is to do an act, is to perform whatever is agreed. But the contract with Mr. B is to refrain from an act. The contract itself is entered for refraining from an act. If he comes and argues, it is breach. If A doesn't come and argue, it's breach. Contract with B is covered by this clause, agreeing to refrain from an obligation to do. But contract with Mr. A is not under this clause. Breach of it cannot be covered here. So you cannot bring the breach clause under this specific entry. You cannot bring this declared service entry is there, or this entry in schedule 2 of the GST is there to cover situations where we engage people to refrain from doing, where refraining from doing is performance, where refraining from doing is not a breach, where refraining from doing is a breach, that will never get covered under any of these clauses. I mean, there can be several situations. Some fellow comes and puts up a big genset, a mall or something comes up, puts a big genset next to my house. It's so noisy, it's so polluting. I issue a legal notice to him. He says, forget all these things. I'll pay you monthly so much amount. You just be done with it. Don't do anything. So he's asking me to tolerate his act of putting up his genset, etc., his noisy genset. So there I agree to tolerate. That is covered under this clause. Not under a contract where I breach and call it as tolerance. That is not. So therefore, there is a difference between these. A breach is not covered under this clause. Just because an amount is mentioned there does not mean it will get covered under this clause. In fact, section 74 of the Contract Act contemplates a named damage mentioned in the agreement itself. And still it calls it as consequence of breach of contract. Therefore, just because an amount is entered as a consequence of breach, it will never become a declared service. Therefore, to my mind again, this won't get covered under this as well. Specific issues like this, that is non-compete fee. So this is also part of slum sale. Maybe Mr. Prasad will also cover it, but this is a specific situation where I was running a good business and I sell it lock, stock and barrel to another company who takes it over. I am a big scientist. I have a lot of patents in my name. And it's a big pharmaceutical company. I am a doctor, big pharmaceutical company. I have done a lot of research. Then some big multinational company comes and says that I want to buy your entire company. So I sell to him as a slum sale. But the knowledge is still with me. I can still do something and enter into the same business, disrupt his business. So the contract, in the contract itself, the company stipulates that I am paying you so much consideration, but for next 3 years, you will not do this business at all. Next 3 years, you will be out of pharmaceutical business. I say, no, whatever I have received is only for slum sale. You are asking me to not compete with you. That means there is a loss of business for me. You are stopping me from performing anything, so I can't. So the company says, no, I will pay you so much. What is that amount for? This contract is where we have a contract whereby he is asking me to refrain from continuing my existing business, even in my personal name. He is refraining me to do that, and for which he is paying me a consideration. This will be covered under this. It is. It is not consequence of breach. I am not committing any breach. It is very much a performance where he asked me not to do and I agree not to do. So therefore, this will be covered under declared service. But what about liquidated damages? See liquidated damages. See, liquidated damages means where we agree to perform and other person doesn't perform or doesn't perform as per the contract, then I impose some damages on him. Very similar to foreclosure charges. He has committed a breach of it. Therefore, that amount cannot be treated as consideration for the contract. Similarly, notice pay, which is received by the employer from the employee. Employer requires the employee to work with him for 3 years. But this employee comes at the end of 2 years and says, I don't want to continue with you. But the employer wants the employee to continue. Employee doesn't. So he's committing a breach of the contract. So whatever the employer receives from the employee is only compensation. So there are several examples like this. FOC supplies received by supplier. Diesel in mining. This is not exactly breach, but what we are talking about is here whether it is condition of the contract or a consideration, where the contract itself stipulates that so much diesel should be provided by the mining company, etc. Like NM Goel situation. I own the mines. I engage a contractor to come and do some mining activity, and I tell him that I will provide so much diesel to you free of cost. So what will happen to that? Is it a consideration or is it a covenant, a condition of the contract? So therefore, that will also depend. Cement and steel is the NM Goel example. Molds and dies tools, we already have a circular also saying that it is a condition of the contract. So therefore, if I am the OEM manufacturer, there is a component manufacturer. OEM manufacturer gives his tool to the component manufacturer for the component manufacturer to use it and manufacture the components. So when what is liable to tax in the hands of the component manufacturer? Is it only the money consideration paid by OEM, or should we also amortize the value of all these tools, dies, etc.? There is also a circular saying that this is only a condition of the contract. That is, the component manufacturer is expected to manufacture using the molded die or dies provided by the OEM. So therefore, it is only a condition that OEM should make available the tool, and tool is not supplied by the OEM to the component manufacturer. So therefore, that will be condition and not a consideration, but it will clearly depend on how the contract is entered. It is quite possible to enter into a contract where it will be treated as consideration also. So it will hugely depend on whether it is a make available or is it a consideration itself. Barter transactions, landowner, developer arrangements. Here again, like I have the land, I engage a developer, he develops there. So the landowner allows the developer to come and do something on his land. So when the landowner allows the developer some rights over the land, is it a consideration or is it a condition of the contract that the contract will be performed only when this is given? So therefore, giving the land, allowing the rights to the developer to enter and perform, it can be treated as condition also, it can become consideration also depending on the contract. So these are some specific cases where the principle comes in, that is the difference between consideration and condition. So with this, I end my session. It will be very, very interesting to have some questions or suggestions from all of you. I already see a few things in the chat box. I will now open and read those also. If anyone has any questions, please ask me. Yes.
Thank you, Raghavan sir, for another enlightening session. First, I would go with Swaminathan sir. Swaminathan sir.
Yes, sir.
Raghavan, you just told me that this is applicable to prior 2012. Am I right?
Yes, sir. Also,
Yeah. No. You said it is prior to 2012.
Decisions, yes.
Yeah. Is it the pre-closure is 2012 or the contract which I have entered is to be prior to 2012?
Sir, in that case, like talking about the facts of that case, the foreclosure itself happened prior to 2012. Therefore, contract has to be before only. But
So suppose I would have entered a contract prior to the foreclosure takes place after 2012, this REPCO will not be applicable is your point.
no, sir. That again actually begs the question, because as you know that under service tax also the taxable event is rendition of service. So this is transaction-based taxation. So therefore, taxable event is rendition of service, which is the time the service is rendered when the contract is entered. Or if you treat foreclosure itself as a service, then you have to apply post 2012. But there we are saying it is not a service at all, as in not an independent service at all.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Sir, there are a couple of questions in the chat box from Mr. Ashutosh.
Yes,
and
yes.
Natarajan sir and Gokarnation sir are also in line.
Yes. Should I first read this Mr. Ashutosh Shukla's chat?
I'll unmute him, sir.
Okay, great. Okay.
Mr. Ashutosh? Mr. Ashutosh, can you unmute yourself? I think he is not responding. In the meanwhile, we'll go to Natarajan sir first and then
Yes.
Natarajan sir?
Yeah, you unmuted me, no? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Raghavan, you have dealt with a case where the condition of the contract is arising out of the breach of the contract. Say, let it be liquidated damages or the REPCO finance. In all these cases, it is arising at the time of when there is a breach in the contract by way of damage or compensation. There are also situations where the condition of contract is not arising because of any breach. I will give some example which we are day to day facing in GST field. Say, for example, an employer and employee. Employment is outside the levy of GST. The employee need not pay GST on the salary. The employer will also be giving food, canteen food, subsidized rate, or a transport facility, or a uniform. For all this, he may charge some nominal amount. They may not be the entire cost of it. He may charge a nominal amount. The department always say that this is a supply from employer to employee. Only from employee to employer is outside the tax net. This is a supply. You are supplying food. You are supplying transport. You are supplying uniform. So you have to pay the tax. And again, employer and employee are related person. So valuation also becomes an issue. So the nominal amount charged will not be accepted as a value. But if you see that this is also a condition of the contract. Once you come to my employment, you have to take the food in my canteen, and this is a condition of a contract. Can we say that? And similarly for transport or uniform or whatever it is.
Sir, so for this question, sir, I'll just show you again the Chaturbhuj Vitaldas, that second paragraph.
Yeah.
That may be relevant here. I'll just share it again, Prithvi. Yes. Let us assume for a minute it is a condition of the employment contract. Let us assume to be so. Sir, this second bullet, sir.
Yeah.
The consideration for each condition in a case like this is the consideration for the contract taken as a whole. That is, it may be a condition. There may be a consideration identified to each of these conditions, but still it is to be taken as consideration for the whole of the contract. It is not split up into several considerations apportioned between each term separately. This is what Supreme Court says in this matter. So therefore, you will have to counter this.
Yeah, because here in my case,
I understand that we are not talking about breach versus performance here.
Yes,
totally different topic. That is condition versus consideration.
And moreover, it is vice versa. The amount, whatever it is not for the employment contract. The service provider is the employee, and the service recipient is the employer.
Correct.
And here it is the vice versa, where it becomes so. How to apply the condition of contract principle is a little hazy. Maybe we may have to think it over further and come to. We may have to stretch it further.
Yes.
So when both the parties are involved, one transaction is not liable to tax. Whether the other party's obligation can become an independent supply, or can we treat it as a condition of the contract, is an issue.
You know, sir,
which we have to...
you know better. Some things are better researched in the chamber only. Yes. I will stop the sharing.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. We'll go with Gokarn Nation, sir, next. Gokarn Nation, sir, kindly unmute.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Unmuted. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir. Good evening.
Now, Mr. Natarajan, first I will go with Mr. Natarajan's question, where employer is providing various uniform, shoes, safety equipments, food, etc., etc. Everything has been provided as per the statutory act and also as per the contracts of the agreement, the employment agreement. Here, the employer is taking everything into employee cost. Suppose when you apply for a job, the total amount spent by the employer to employee is taken as an employee cost.
Sir, Gokarn Nation, sir.
Yes.
What you are saying is one scenario.
One scenario.
There can be a scenario which is not part of CTC also.
No, that's why I'm telling you. Any company will put a CTC, including all the other direct or indirect expenses incurred by them. So in that case, can't we not take it as an employee cost because it's an employment salary
Sir,
paid?
if you closely listen to Mr. Natarajan, sir, his question is not on related party valuation and that whether it is a supply or not. That is not his question. All these things what you are saying will come in where it is free of cost. But his specific question was where employee is charged some amount by the employer.
That's what I'm telling, sir.
This is over and above what the employer will pay to the employee as salary or CTC, etc. So over and above that, there is some slight recovery from the employee by the employer. So therefore, what you are saying, will it still apply? Maybe Mr. Natarajan may also be unmuted. He can also join. He can also better explain his question. But this is a slightly different situation from what you are saying.
Yes, Raghav.
I agree with him also. But overall, if I put everything together, I spend 10 rupees, I charge it off 9 rupees from my account, and I recover only 1 rupee. Net result is for the companies to the employees only 9 rupees. Like that, we have.
Yes. No, net result is 9. Net result is 9. But what will happen to that one?
That's what I'm telling you, sir. I am putting 10 rupees in my cost. I am taking as a cost. The 1 rupee is reduced from the cost of the same. Suppose in my P&L account, suppose I put the canteen expenses 100 rupees. If I recover 10 rupees from the employees, I put the credit side 10 rupees, debit side 100 rupees. Net 90 will go to my P&L account. That's all the question is. But it is a part of the employment. What is it is right. It's only added to my because it can be argued in a different, slightly modified way.
Yes.
That's why it's relation to employment. Now I am coming to my question.
Yes, sir. Yes.
The landowner and the builder. The builder entered into a joint development agreement with the landowner. There are 50 people in the existing flat owners, housing board flat, whatever it may be. So the builder is telling, okay, the project will take 2 years. You take any rented house. I will pay you rent for that till the completion of the project and handing over the flats to you. So I'll say 2 years. Each landowner is taking one house in Anna Nagar nearby. 50,000 rupees rent, 40,000 rupees rent, they are paying to their house owner. So that is being reimbursed by the builder. How it is to be treated under GST? It will come under this tolerating an act till the construction is made. He is tolerating not to reside here and to reside in some other residentials. Will it attract GST? This is question number 1. Question number 2, arbitration clause in the contract agreement. Suppose if there is a dispute may be on account of non-performing, on account of not performing, on account of the default in the performing, or payment is not made. So many issues are there in the arbitration clause. Both parties went to an arbitrator. Arbitrator is giving an award. Some compensation he is giving me. It's illegal. the other party can go to high court, whatever it may be. But finally, there is an award. The award may be a cash compensation, or there is a additional cost, and there is an alternative doing an act by a third party, whatever it may be. So how it is to be treated in this scenario, sir? This is two questions.
Okay, sir. Okay. Sir, insofar as your first question is concerned, that is where the rent, the lease deed, I mean, a rental is taken by the landowner. He is staying somewhere for which the builder is paying during the term. Okay. Your question, number one, is not whether the consideration in the hands of the builder should be deducted to the extent of this rent. That is not your question. That will be a more difficult question. You are not asking that. So
No. Okay. This is the GST point only, tolerating the
Correct. So next is, with respect to the landowner, when he is staying outside, for which he is paying the rent, lease deed is in the name of the landowner. Lease deed is not in the name of the builder. Because if the lease deed is in the name of the builder, then also problem is solved. So therefore, let us not have it. The lease deed is in the name of the landowner. Landowner pays the rent and gets it reimbursed from the builder. In this, for this reimbursement, whether there is any GST at all, I do not see the landowner providing any service as such to the builder. It is forming part of the same contract where the builder says, I will compensate you, pay this amount, etc. for the time when you are staying outside. But in the assuming that the total rental amount paid per year is more than the threshold limit, etc. because those things also come in. But assuming all those things, what is the supply which is being provided by the landowner? That I am unable to identify.
Here, tolerating an act because I am leaving.
No, he has agreed. He has agreed for this tenure. He is not tolerating beyond the agreed tenure. It is within the tenure. So therefore, to that extent, he doesn't seem to be tolerating. Or you may say that because I have given you this place, you have thrown me out of my place. I am tolerating your possession of the land. Yes, that maybe that is possible, but that's very roundabout. I mean, that would be far-fetched to my mind.
It's like a second question, sir. Arbitration.
Second question, sir. Arbitration is a very, very important question. That's a good question. Sir, they have gone into arbitration. They received some amount. That is all fine. But what is this amount towards? Suppose in an arbitration, I can have a dispute on what the contractual consideration should be. If the arbitrator decides on what the contractual consideration should be, then that amount will form part of the consideration itself. But if the arbitrator decides on how much should be paid for the delay in performance of the contract, then it becomes compensation for damages. So therefore, we have to see the award. If the award is towards determination of the price or the contract value itself, then that amount will form part of consideration. If the arbitral dispute is towards what is the, I mean, damages, etc., what should be paid towards damages, etc., then that will go into damages clause. So therefore, arbitral award just like that cannot be answered. We have to see what is the award for. Based on that, we have to decide.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Vishwanathan, sir.
Raghavendra Ambadran,
Yes, sir.
as usual, you excel. I was very clear.
Thank you, sir.
I thought I am not going to ask any question, but when you explained Natarajanji's question, you made one point which created a little doubt in my mind. I thought I must clear it before further proceeding. You said because of the employer-employee contract, some amount is paid which is exceeding the salary. Therefore, it may come. That is the view you have expressed, if I am right. But my point is the question of law is there is no separate contract for tolerating anything by the employer. It is the breach of the contract of his employment he wants to go, that for which the payment is collected. Like in
You are talking about notice pay?
Yes.
Or you are talking about Natarajan sir's example?
Natarajan sir's example.
Natarajan sir's example was during the course of employment, while he is working there, some facilities are provided by the employer to the employee, for which employer is collecting some nominal amount from the employees.
No, it has nothing to do with
Nothing
the
to
breach of
notice pay.
contract.
No, sir. No. It is
Nothing
not breach
to do
of
with the
contract.
subject you took today.
No, sir. It is related to subject which I took, because the subject for today is actually, there are two parts to it. One is, in fact, I told also Natarajan sir, one is towards performance versus breach. Other is condition versus consideration. Natarajan sir's question was not on performance versus breach, but it was on whether it is consideration or condition. On that point, it is relevant.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we will take up two more questions, one from Rohan, and then you can answer Mr. Ashutosh's question, and then
Sure.
Yes,
No, before that, I want Rohan to answer Mr. Gokarnasan sir's first question.
I'll unmute him. Sir.
Yes.
I'll unmute. Rohan,
before you ask, first give the answer to, and also tell me if my answer was sufficient to Gokarnasan sir's first question on the landowner builder part.
Sir, landowner builder part, I think the answer was fairly sufficient. I think that is the correct answer. Like I don't have a different view. On the employer-employee wala, I think if there is no recovery, I think what Natarajan sir is saying, I think it makes sense. There is no separate supply per se, but where there is a recovery, I think there is a difficulty. But then, it can create a lot of issues in the sense that, let us take a case of an insurance, wherein I recover part of the premium from the employee. Like if there is a service, what is the service? I am not an insurance company. Can I even provide an insurance service to employee? Like, how will you categorize those services? Let us say I provide free telecommunication, in the sense that I'm ready to reimburse half of the bill of whatever the employees incur in terms of their Airtel bill or whatever.
No, I get it. So you are saying you are not registered with IRDA, you don't have a telecom license, you are not a telegraph authority. So therefore, it cannot be treated as if you provide that service to your employee. That is your point, right?
So it is slightly dicey on that area as to what.
Natarajan sir himself can clarify on that. What should be the answer? No, you are on mute, sir. Natarajan sir, you are on mute.
I'll unmute him.
Natarajan sir says he is intermediary. Intermediary for no consideration.
Yeah, I am arranging or facilitating that service. So classification is not a problem.
That's an escape route.
So anything can be put under that. Anyway, these are all the areas which will keep us engaged in future. We cannot expect a solution across a session.
Yes. Rohan, you had any question?
Yeah, sir. The question that I had is on tool or mold amortization. Now, we have a sales tax judgment of Mori-Roku which says that it is not price per se, because price is different from value. So
that is because excess valuation versus sales tax valuation, UP trade tax valuation.
Yes. But we also have a settled jurisprudence in excise wherein they said that as a concept of value, we need to go into intrinsic value, etc. So it has to be added. Now, I understand that Rule 6 of Central Excise Valuation Rule specifically provided for inclusion of amortization of tools and molds. But you can come to Rule 6 only if you say price is not the sole consideration. And the concept of transaction value has been borrowed largely from Central Excise. So consideration as a concept is a contract-based concept. But the Section 15 valuation has been borrowed from Central Excise. So do you think there can be a dispute on amortization?
To be honest, and you may even laugh at me, but I feel, be it Fiat, be it Mori-Roku, it was not argued on consideration versus condition. In fact, in Mori-Roku, it was assumed to be an additional consideration. The only dispute was when it is included in central excise valuation, should it be included? In sales tax valuation versus central excise valuation. That was the issue. Nobody argued. It was not argued on whether it is a consideration at all. In Fiat also, it was only, Fiat went on a totally different tangent that we all know. But there also it was not argued on whether it is a condition versus consideration. So therefore, I would feel that we all are becoming wiser every day. I feel Mori-Roku and Fiat will have to be looked into again. That is, to put it very, very at a higher level, Rule 6 of Central Excise Valuation itself all the cases under that will need a relook, because there all we have assumed all along that whatever is given by buyer to the seller or the manufacturer will be treated as a consideration. It was not argued on whether it is a condition, whether it is a make available, etc. So therefore, all these things will have a relook. Moriroku is not a judgment, an authority on condition versus consideration. Moriroku is an authority only on how excise valuation works, etc. So therefore, we cannot treat it as a precedent on this point. You know better that a judgment is an authority only for what it has held and not for what all you can logically flow out of it. We cannot derive all these things from Moriroku. So it will not be treated as a precedent on this point.
Okay, sir.
Sir, if you can take up the questions of Mr.
Yes, I will read Mr. Ashutosh's question. He says, you said liquidated damages is not consideration. Then say contract value is 100 and amount towards liquidated damages is 10. Then whether GST is payable on 100 or 90. So to answer this question, it seems the damages is payable by the seller to the buyer. Then only this will arise. All along we have seen from a different perspective. But here, in fact, if you see Repco, etc., it is a service recipient only who was paying the damages also. But here the question is, the damages is payable by the seller to the buyer. So seller sells it for 100 rupees, but buyer imposes liquidated damages on the seller. Therefore, seller pays 10 rupees to the buyer. So in effect, the seller receives only 90. The question is whether seller is liable to pay tax on 90 or 100. Clearly, the answer is 100. Because that is the consideration for performance of the contract. Subsequently, whatever damage has been paid by the seller to the buyer is out of the consideration. In fact, in income tax, we all know that there is something called application of income and diversion of income by overriding title. Like this, here it will be an application of income. So there, like deficiency in supply is the example Mr. Ashutosh is giving. So deficiency in supply, therefore it is on the seller. Therefore, the consideration is 100. For deficiency, that fellow has imposed damages on the seller. That 10 will be damages only. It is not a case where for the substandard supply, etc., the contract value has been revised. If the contract value has been revised, if it is a novation, where they say now because I enter into a contract for that goods, but you have supplied this goods, therefore for this goods, the contract value itself is 90. If you agree like that, then 90 is the consideration. But having entered into a contract for 100 and accepted those goods also, and then imposed a damage for breach of it, that damage is separate from consideration for the contract. Therefore, 100 is the consideration, 10 is damages. You can do a novation of the contract, say that for these goods, the contract itself is different. We cancel that contract, we enter into a fresh contract, it is 90, that's a different matter. But in this case, it is only an application of the consideration, it is not a diversion. That is, it won't be treated as 90, it will be treated as 100, and 10 is damages, which is separate. For the next question, whether the liquidated damages will be considered as towards the deficiency in supply. So I should issue credit note for receipt of, sir, this credit note, etc., what you issue is not GST credit note. This is only for your business. So when you talk about credit note, this is not anything to do with GST. GST is on 100. So you can issue credit note, which is a commercial credit note, not a GST credit note, because it is not going to touch the GST component in the invoice. Therefore, you can issue credit note, but that will be commercial credit note.
Thank you very much, Raghavan sir.
Thank you.
I request APS sir to kindly tell a few lines and then we can close the session. APS sir.
Sir, it was altogether it was a new subject today, and it was well taken by Mr. Raghavan as usual. And today Mr. Gokarneswar and Natarajan contributed well, and the questions were flooded till the last minute. That's a unique day today. And Rohan Muralidharan also contributed well, sir. So it shows us that there are still several areas to be covered in GST. Though we have come about 120 sessions, still we may have 100 sessions, topics or about 100 sessions from GST. I think tomorrow also incidentally, we fixed that slump sale tomorrow. So today topic and tomorrow topic both seems to be connected. So it will be very useful to all the participants. Thank you, Mr. Raghavan Rambhadraan,
Thank you, sir.
and
Thank you.
all
Thank
the
you, all of you.
participants today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, APS sir, and thank you, Raghavan sir, once again.
Thank you. Thank you.
I once
Thank
again
you.
wish all of you a very happy Independence Day. As APS sir has put that tomorrow we'll be having a talk on slum sale by Prasad sir, which will be similar to today's topic. It will touch upon. So I think I request all of you to join tomorrow also, so that we can have a continuation on this talk. And I thank once again all for joining us. This session will also be put up in our YouTube channel. Thank you very much. Please take care of yourself and stay home and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.